all of you tonight. I've got two concepts that I'd like to kind of cover tonight. We're just a little bit behind on the agenda, so I'm going to hurry through these quite a bit. I do have quite a bit of material. The first thing I'd like to talk about is dealing a little bit with weed control in high mountain pastures. We have quite a bit of information available on regular pastures that would be in lower valley areas. But we often don't talk about higher elevation areas. We did a project here in Sevier County a number of years ago that I thought I would share a little bit tonight that may help with some of those higher elevation areas. Would like to acknowledge the researchers and co-authors, the most notable being Dr. Whitson. He's an extension weed specialist at the University of Wyoming that's been retired for a number of years. And he helped provided the lion's share of the work on this particular project. Would like to acknowledge Mr. Stuart Johnson, who's the cooperator. Their operation consists of several thousand acres of high mountain pasture and rangeland in the top of Salina Canyon. If you're familiar with I-70 and Salina Canyon is the location. So I first received a call from Stuart about weed issues in their pastures. He asked myself to come up and take a look. And if you look in this pasture to the right, and I hope you can see my cursor, all of this area that's green out in the middle of this high mountain meadow is not grass. It consists of two primary weeds that I'll explain a little bit of a detail. This is Stuart's and Karma Johnson's family here on the left, addressing members of Congress last fall. And you can get a sense of how large area this is at the mountain ranch. The two primary weeds are golden pea, and which you can see here in the foreground. It's in the Fabaceae family, the bean family, and it was crowding out a lot of the forage. And the other one is Thermopsis. So very briefly, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the ecology on these individual plants, but in short, they're not on the noxious weed list. They're not palatable. They're highly competitive with grasses, and typically grow at high elevations, and they are perennials. That reproduce, regrow each year from underground rootstocks and branching roots. Here's Thermopsis or golden pea. It's one that will grow at sea level as well as high elevations, and many of the same characteristics as the Rocky Mountain iris. So our study consisted of evaluating a number of herbicides and their efficacy at controlling these two problem weeds. We used standard research methods. Not only were we controlling weeds, but we wanted to control two application methods. One is referred to as a wet blade mower, and I'm seeing here I've got a typo, my apology, and also a standard boom sprayers. And we compared the 5 herbicides listed against each other on their efficacy at controlling. They were applied at standard rates, and also using standard surfactants and other additives to the tank. They included Escort, Plateau, Redeem, Paramount, and Distinct. I will give you a little bit of a spoil alert. This is some information showing the wet blade mower. It's a real interesting piece of equipment. It was not effective in the application process, as a spoil alert. It is essentially a brush hog that's fitted with a herbicide application system that applies the herbicide and the water to the blade that's spinning underneath the mower. And through interesting physics, that herbicide collects on the bottom of the blade, and as it cuts through the plant, it leaves the herbicide on the cut surface of the plant, as you can see in this inset photograph on the right with this blue color, is where it applies the herbicide directly to the plant. But it was not as effective as the standard spray methods, which we're accustomed to using. And you can see the research plot here on the left in this photograph showing the cut strips and the spray strips. A lot of information here, but very short, simple answer. In the first year evaluation represented here on the front or on the top of the table, The percent control was excellent with plateau, but at the 12 ounce rate, 12 ounces of plateau was very, very active on grasses. We had excessive, unacceptable grass mortality, and therefore we are not recommending it. We did get 100% control on Rocky Mountain iris. If you can see the titles here on the top with these two columns. This column is the spray column. This spray column is the wet blade column. Whoops. Got to back up. And then here is the Thermopsis or golden pea on the right, and it plateau performed very poorly in controlling Thermopsis. Escort at a 1 ounce rate was very effective when sprayed in controlling both iris and Thermopsis, both the first year evaluation and second year evaluation. So concluding that study, Escort controlled 89 to 100% of the iris, and it controlled 90% of the Thermopsis or golden pea, and using the spray method. And it was also the most cost-effective chemical that was used to treat it. After we conducted the research, the Johnsons came in and sprayed 1,100 acres with an airplane and got excellent control on both of these weedy species using Escort. And the spray method, as I mentioned, was effective, whereas the wet blade mower was a kind of a fun concept to try, but it was not worth the hassle. I want to switch now to last few moments and talk about weed control strategies when costs are high and income is low. And I will skip through these quite a bit. Dr. Corey Ransom, our extension weed specialist, helped provide information to this presentation. There's a number of publications and resources out there to help you as you try and come up with strategies in the current economic conditions we have to address weed control issues in pastures. They tend to focus on preventing weed problems to begin with, prevent them from establishing when you do get weeds come into your pastures, and then preventing from spreading once you get them. Number of resources out there to help with identification. And this video will be posted later on. You can come back and study this in more detail, but there's apps for phones, there's books, there's your county extension office, and a lot of resources on the internet. Here's a number of weed control handbooks and specimen label resources that are free and readily available, or mostly free on the internet, that provide excellent recommendations on chemicals and their efficacy on particular weedy species in your pastures, and then also specimen labels to find that. This is one that I use a lot, this cdms.net, where you can come in and pull up specimen labels to help read through those. And as always, remember that your herbicide labels are the law and should be followed, even though an extension agent or a specialist or the neighbor down the road may recommend a particular way to control weeds. Remember that you're always held against the standard of the pesticide label. So a few brief ideas and methods for controlling weeds. Many of our presenters have talked about this: prevention, cultural, biological, physical, mechanical. These are all additional options in addition to just simply pulling out the herbicides and giving them a squirt. A couple of key questions when you're looking at weed problems in your pasture is this question right here at the top. What is causing the weed problem in the first place? And once you answer that question, then it tends to open up an effective way to address the weed control problem in your pasture. Most of the time, you've got weedy pastures because of grazing issues, overgrazing, wrong timing, wrong animals, soil fertility problems, irrigation problems, not having the right seed mix to begin with. And so following some general guidelines right off the bat will help with preventing weed problems to begin with. Proper irrigation and fertility, mowing to prevent seed production. I'll talk about that more in a moment. Spot spraying as soon as weeds are detected, and then always keep your eye on your pastures and keep watching them and don't let time go by. This is probably the most important point I wish to emphasize with with when you're approaching controlling weeds in a pasture during the current climate of high costs and low income. Please, please, please don't skip a year of treatment. And the reason for this is weed seeds are viable in the soil bank from 10 to 30 years. Some weed seeds are even viable long. And this second bullet point here, skipping 1 year will literally undo years of progress on reducing seeds in the soil bank. And they will diminish previous financial investments in above ground weed control, as well as reducing the seed load in the soil. This is an example of downy brome, which the seed is not viable for a long time in the soil, but it takes, even after 5 years of continuous treatment, you've still got seed resources there. So it takes a long time to deplete the seeds out of the seed bank. Do consistently treat every year. This will prevent annual seed production. That's kind of the goal. You may develop a less expensive alternative to your weed control program on a high-priced year. But if you do so, target seed production. Preventing that seed production from occurring is the critical issue. Advantages of this are if you come up with non-Cadillac herbicide treatment methods, they can be less expensive on a particular year. They can prevent seed production. The timing of applications becomes quite critical to address that. The disadvantages is that dependent upon the products you select, they may not kill the above ground plant, and they may not kill the below ground perennial root system, but hopefully they will kill and prevent the seed production from occurring. Broadcast application costs are currently about $8 an acre. So if you can take a spot spraying approach instead of a broadcast spraying approach, you can sometimes save quite a bit of money, especially if you have lighter weed pressure and you don't necessarily need to treat the whole pasture. One quick example here as I'm closing out that I will provide. In the case of Whitetop, and the correct common name of Whitetop is called Hoary Cress. You can come in with a 2,4-D application at 1 quart per acre, cost you about $5 an acre, and it will help to reduce weed seed production and control it to some degree. It would not necessarily be a Cadillac treatment. Here's Escort at an ounce per acre. It's very effective at controlling multiple year control for about $4 an acre. Tellar, frankly, is the Cadillac way. Tellar has long been known to be the very best product on controlling Hoary Cress, but it's going to, 1 ounce of it's going to cost you $22 an acre. So you may not be able to afford that 1 year. So look at some of these less expensive options, and then when prices adjust and income's up, you can go back to the Cadillac approach. And then there's other mechanical methods as well that can be used. I will skip these next few slides on Whitetop that are showing the efficacy of 2,4-D and Escort over time. I just show this one that the 2,4-D was not nearly as effective after 2 years of control. And we'll wind that my presentation up. I'm not sure if we've got time for questions. We'll probably defer to a later point.